What amazing way, what an awesome way to begin this morning. So now the show is on, all yours.
Thank you, Nacho. Morning, everyone. I guess fireside chats with this weather is not a compelling proposition, but in any case, it's exciting to see people coming from different places today here to discuss and to figure out ways to solve some of the most pressing issues we have, environmental and social. We at Net Positive Labs are on a mission to accelerate the transformation towards a more sustainable world, a more sustainable system, and we have chosen to do this using venture building, so creating the businesses out there that would give optionality to consumers and companies to behave in a more sustainable way, right? And consumers and companies are already on a path to behave in a more, I would say, responsible way. And some are aware of where they stand. Some have already started taking action and reducing their carbon footprint. And of course, offsetting the remaining, it's of course another option. And that's where Moss, I guess, takes a role. So we're going to be having a chat so that Luis Felipe here, CEO of Moss, can share his insights and details on that, on what Moss is doing. So maybe first we can start. Would you please share where did this journey started? So when was that you realized that there was something needed to be done and that Moss needed to exist?
Thank you, Gustavo. Good morning, everyone. Moss began, I had a career in the financial markets, and I got somewhat disillusioned with, making rich people richer. The Bolsonaro government came in. As we all know, it was a disaster for the environment, and especially for the Amazon forest. Deforestation went rampant, and I started thinking the solution, the traditional solution for fighting deforestation in Brazil or generally in the world has been governments and NGOs. So governments and the third sector and philanthropy. And obviously, unfortunately, that hasn't really worked, right? Year in, year out, we hear more and more of the Amazon being deforested. And the deforestation of the Amazon is a huge, huge disaster. I cannot emphasize enough of how much of an existential threat it is to us as humankind. The Amazon holds 1/3 of all species in the world, and the Amazon holds about 1 in every 4, so 25% of all trees in the world are in the Brazilian Amazon. And if I count like this, 1, 2, 3, we just lost 3 rooms the size of this room here, full of trees in the Amazon. We're losing an area around almost the size of Spain per year of forest globally, and about half of that is in the Brazilian Amazon. So it's an absolute disaster. I started looking into what can be done, and I found out a lot of myths and realities about the Amazon. First is that we have this image that the Amazon is being deforested because of logging, right? People with chainsaws cutting down trees and stuff, and it's not. It's being burnt down for agribusiness. 90% of Amazon forests burning or deforestation comes from burning for cattle and for soy. And the reason why this happens too is because the forested area in the Amazon is way cheaper than deforested area. So what people do, and also not a lot of people know, 20% of the Amazon is private. In the Brazilian dictatorship, they donated, the government donated or sold large chunks of the Amazon. So people buy the forested land for $100, they burn it, and they resell for $500. And the only way, in spite of the fact that carbon credits are criticized, that it's relatively new, not a lot of people know about it, the only way that we can generate a remuneration for, that hectare, that football field worth of forest, to become more expensive than the deforested area, to drive the value up to $1,000, is via carbon credits. When you have a carbon credit project, and this is what Moss does using technology, I'm going to talk about that, it generates a hectare, so a football field worth of forest will generate $100 per year for 30 years of remuneration for conservation work. Well, if an asset, if a land is generating $100 in rent, it's not going to stay at $100, right? It's going to go to a value of $800, $1,000. When the forested land value is higher than the deforested, people stop deforesting, right? Because they want to protect their cash cow, their chicken of the golden eggs. And the employment of technology comes from the fact that I started thinking, well, how come nobody knows about this? How come whenever I talk about this, it always comes across as, as news, as people are in shock. Really? So people can really make that much money? And the reason is that the carbon credit system is still very analogic. Think very analog. Think taxis before Uber. Think, hotels before Airbnb. It's the same sort of dynamic. The auditing, the verification process for a carbon credit generation is still very manual, very presential. People still, the registries that verify the projects and issue the credits, they still require teams of 10 people to go to the middle of the Amazon, stay there for 30 months, and measure trees with tape to see their volume. This is in a time of artificial intelligence, of ChatGPT, where the whole globe has been mapped by Google in real time. And this is what we're trying to do via automation of processes, artificial intelligence, big data strategies to add technology so that this process becomes cheaper and more accessible.
So you were talking about I would say, the reputational problems around voluntary carbon markets, I would say, which is maybe the bigger part. And in particular, REDD+ projects, which is mainly the key point there. So how is Moss addressing these reputational problems?
Great point. So first of all, also there are many, just as there are many myths and reality about the Amazon, there are many myths and reality about carbon credits. The first, people always think carbon credits comes only from sequestering carbon, from planting trees. That's only 7% of the total volume of carbon credits. A carbon credit is defined more amply as a digital certificate that proves that either a tree was planted and therefore carbon sequestered, or more importantly and more widely adopted, that a project or a company via a carbon credit project avoided the emission of 1 ton of carbon. So think of a wind farm. We all know wind farms and renewable energy generate carbon credits, but we also know that windmills don't take CO2 out of the air. Well, how are they generating carbon credits? A wind farm of, let's say, 100 megawatts is avoiding the construction of a coal thermal plant that would burn coal, pollute or emit 1 million tons per year. Each avoided ton is 1 carbon credit, so this wind farm will generate 1 million carbon credits per year. Forests or forestry projects and the famous or infamous REDD+ projects, they work the same way. When 2/3 of Brazil's emissions comes from us, we're the 5th largest polluter in the world. 2/3 of our emissions, of our pollution, comes from us burning trees. So when you conserve a forest, half of the weight of a tree is made of carbon. So you avoid that the carbon stored in that tree goes to the air as CO2 and CH4 when it's burnt. Now, all this is complex. It's not as intuitive. So part of the problem is, getting these complex, issues or definitions across to people. On the credibility side, there have been, some bad apples, let's say, some bad projects, but the media is cherry-picking projects where it didn't really benefit the communities, where it overcredited, but percentage-wise, it's very low. And RED works. When you compare countries that have RED or conservation, RED stands for reduction in emissions from degradation and deforestation. So countries that have RED projects, they deforest, their deforestation rates are higher than countries that don't have it. So it works. So it's a matter of applying technology also so that all of us, you know, global stakeholders, right, because we all share the same planet, the same air, so that we can accompany via dashboards, via real-time satellite imaging what's going on in the projects and to see for yourself and to use latest technology, for example, blockchain, to secure the auditability and the credibility of the information that leads to that project generation. So I think the sector is still stuck in the 1990s in terms of technology, of using real-time dashboards, of using
Totally.
you know, tools like Google Maps and stuff to create that accountability.
So now that you mentioned blockchain technology, so what is the role of crypto in your case? I guess it's also a more accurate way to put it, maybe. What is the role of crypto in your business, in your value prop?
There are many roles. The first one is to secure 100% that there's no double spending or double selling of the same credit. Since it's a digital asset, and since this is a voluntary system that is not governed by any, you know, regulators or government regulators, there has been fraud in the past of, because it's all paper, like PDF trading basically. And as you can imagine, emailing PDFs here and there, you know, someone can claim to have 10 credits and sell 20, right? So blockchain avoids that issue of double spending, right? That's the first one. Creating traceability and auditability too, so that auditors don't have to go through thousands and thousands of PDFs or paper pages, but they can, you know, set up software to filter through data on blockchain. And the second, I would guess, more important one is this is a commodity. Carbon credits are a globally recognized commodity. But unlike oil, unlike corn, unlike soy, they don't really have a liquid secondary market. And anything that doesn't have liquidity has poor price formation, poor transparency on price formation, and therefore demands credibility. So tokenizing the assets and making them available for secondary trading on exchanges, making all that process transparent, makes it so that also the transactions become fairer. Imagine the imbalance of a transaction of a large oil company, you know, negotiating with a small conservation project in the middle of the Amazon. You know, the large company comes and says, how much are you selling for? I'm selling for 5. They say, I buy for 2. And the guy's forced to sell for 2. If you have a secondary market, there's a screen price, right? And with tokenization and the use of blockchain, we can create that transparency on price formation.
Okay. So watching this from a different angle, so the voluntary carbon markets need to scale pretty fast. Every forecast out there is saying that it's around 100 times, right? In around 10 years. So how is Moss contributing to that process of scaling the voluntary carbon markets?
Let me make a very bold statement to maybe make it worth you coming here. You remember this in years to come. This market will multiply by 100 times. It is the highest growth market out there that nobody's still talking about, like very few people are talking about. The voluntary carbon market globally has already multiplied by 10 times in dollar terms in the past 3 years. It went from $300 million globally, which is nothing, to $3 billion. McKinsey estimates $30 billion by 2030. Barclays estimates $200 billion. And it needs to grow because carbon credits are the way for us to internalize the externality of pollution or emissions. There's another fact, too, that favors the growth of voluntary carbon markets, which is we tend to think of the global climate change problem only in terms of fossil fuels, right? Oh, we're using oil, we're using coal, and once we stop using that and we're all driving Teslas and have wind farms, it'll be solved. Wrong. That's 76% of the problem. 24% of the problem will remain, which is places like Indonesia, Africa, Latin America, especially Brazil, burning forests to produce food. That has nothing to do with oil. That has nothing to do with coal. That has nothing to do with fossil fuels. So there's a concept in carbon credits that is called additionality. It means that a carbon credit is generated only when it's not economically viable, feasible for a project to exist. As we know, the cheapest, most economic way to generate energy nowadays is solar and wind. So renewable energy credits, other types of credits are dwindling, they're ceasing to exist, and forestry credits will always exist because this problem of burning the forest to produce food will always exist. So there's a gigantic tailwind, and supporting forces here for voluntary carbon market growth. And the way we're helping is by applying technology to make it easier. So by automating processes, we make the process to certify a carbon credit project. Since it's all very manual, it costs $500,000. By automating processes and using artificial intelligence and machine learning to produce all the technical documentation that is needed, we have already reduced that cost to $100,000. Imagine a pyramid. In Brazil, with this cost of $500,000, we're only accessing 4% of the rural properties. When we reduce it to 100,000, we increase the target achievable or market or the TAM
market, yeah.
by quite a bit, by around, it goes from 4% to 30%. So by using technology, we're decreasing costs as much as possible. By reducing costs, we're promoting the growth of the voluntary carbon market globally.
So what would be the value prop for landowners then, or for developers? So are developers also part of your business model in a way?
Yeah, the business model works this way. We use our system, we have consolidated. Brazil has some really amazing databases. Brazil has 6 million rural properties, and all of them are forced by legislation to upload, to submit what are called shape files or vectorial polygons, maps that are readable in any sort of geospatial software. Brazil is really the only large forested country or large country, like the United States doesn't have this, European countries don't have this, Brazil does. But these databases, Brazil being a federation and a bureaucratic country, the databases don't really talk to each other. So we have built this system that monitors the 6 million properties in real time for the veracity and accuracy of their documentation, of their standing of the forest, and et cetera. And the value prop is we approach outbound, we filter, we do the sourcing of the areas that will generate carbon credits. We go up to a guy that owns, let's say, 100,000 hectares. 100,000 hectares is like 2 Valencias. And that's very common to have private individuals owning 2 Valencias worth of forest in the Amazon. We go up to the guy. For him, the forest is a liability, right? It's a source of cost. Because he needs to spend around $100,000 per year in vigilance, in patrolling, kicking people out, invaders, etc. We go up to this guy and say, look, why don't you enter into a JV with us? You don't need to do anything. Just, you sign, you grant us the right to develop the project, and we share, we split. It's like a revenue sharing model. We split the carbon credits later. On 100,000 hectares, this guy will make $5 million per year for 30 years. So the value proposition is absurd. Instead of spending $100,000 per year forever is going to be making $5 million per year forever, and we get the other half.
And are you financing that operation for them?
Excellent question. So this is capital intensive because of the high certification costs, as I mentioned. So what we do is we sell equity in the projects to large companies that want to have their own carbon credit flow. Or as a financial proposition, the returns are quite high. As an example, this a 100,000 hectare area, which abound in the Amazon, there are many, many, will generate 10 credits at $10 per year. So it'll generate $100 per hectare. So 100,000 hectares times 100, $10 million in revenues of carbon credits per year. What we do is we sell equity in the project, let's say $1 million worth. For 10%, it's a 1-year payback. So, and the IRRs are off the charts. That's another challenge for growth, that people don't know about this. So our challenge is getting the word out there, coming to events like this and saying, look into investing. This is impact investing at its most, right? We're protecting the largest forests. You're making a lot of money, and we're protecting also the local communities and the local biodiversity.
And maybe using the last few minutes there to also to touch one other part that is around consumers. So you're also facilitating, as I was saying, the more responsible behavior from consumers. There's an API there, and would you mind explaining that a bit more?
Sure. We have seen that companies, they want to do something about it. Millennials have become the largest demographic group in the world, surpassing baby boomers in 2019. And millennials care about the environment. So companies are seeing more and more this demand from their consumers and their investors who are younger and younger to do something about their emissions, their pollution, about their environmental actions. But they don't know how to, right? And the first quote-unquote easy step is to calculate their emissions and to offer offsetting along with their products. Like, for example, when you fly, whatever, British Airlines or Iberia, they offer you, right, do you want to offset your flight? Well, but the challenge for the companies is they need to usually invest, IT time, financial resources, time to learn about this, and they don't have the time, they don't have the resources, they don't have the budget. So we have built APIs that calculate what we call the carbon inventory of the companies, how much they emit, and the carbon footprint of their products. We have a plug-and-play system that offers this, as a white label solution for anything, for banks, for sandals, for running shoes, whatever product. And we implement it in days instead of months or sometimes years of implementation internally at a large company.
Great. And maybe the last one, what are the challenges for you at Moss going forward?
What are not the challenges? Challenge is access to, first challenge is demystifying carbon credits and explaining all this because it is complex. Access to capital. Unfortunately, the forests, it's just the way it is. The forests of the world are in the global south, in places like Indonesia, Africa, Southeast Asia, Africa, Latin America, which are places that are not obvious to Europeans, right, to invest. So surpassing that resistance, to invest in a place like Brazil, and also demystifying, the macro and political risks, because they're really lower or smaller than people usually think.
Okay, thank you. So we have just run out of time. So maybe, yeah. Do we have a question there? Perfect.
Well, so is there a possibility for? I'm not sure this is. Yeah, it is working. For private investors like us to invest in your company?
Go to Moss.Earth, email me, you can see my name, right? So it's Luis Adaime altogether at Moss.Earth. We're doing a Series B. You can invest at the project level. You can buy equity in the company. We can talk about also investing in projects of ours like a carbon credit exchange, global carbon credit exchange that we are setting up. But yes, we are open for investments right now.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.